Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Numbers chapter 26. As we continue through the final act of Numbers, we get another list of census data. And yeah, that sounds a little boring and repetitive, but it represents something completely new in the narrative structure of Numbers and of the Torah. Numbers began with a list of census data, but all those people who were counted ended up rebelling against God. They were unfaithful to Him, and they didn't trust in His sovereign power to bring them into the Promised Land. And so now, at the end of the book, nearly 40 years later, we see that God is still keeping His promises. And that's in spite of all the rebellions that have taken place up until this point. God will still empower the Israelites, and He will still allow them to take the Promised Land. And so yeah, what we have in this chapter is a historical record, but it's also a part of a narrative that implies the existence of a loving God, one who will not abandon His people nor leave His creation in a broken state. Then it came about after the plague that the Lord spoke to Moses and to Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saying, "Take a census of all the congregation of the sons of Israel from 20 years old and upward by their fathers' households, whoever is able to go out to war in Israel." So Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, "Take a census of the people from 20 years old and upward, as the Lord has commanded Moses." And so here, God is repeating instruction that He gave all the way back in Numbers chapter 1. Moses, and this time the new priest, Eleazar, Aaron's son, they're told to count up all the fighting men in Israel. That is, all the men who are over 20 years old and don't have any pre-existing conditions. Now, the plague that's being referred to in the immediate context is both a literal plague that God sent after the Israelites were seduced into Moabite cult orgies, but in the greater narrative context of Numbers, this plague refers to the way that the old generation had to die out before the next one could take the Promised Land. And now God is taking a census, counting all the fighting men of this new generation, because the time is almost here for them to take Canaan. Remember that they've been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, since the events of Numbers 13 and 14. But now that time of peace, that time of security, that time of just having a place to call your own, it's all right around the corner, giving hope for the children of Israel. Now the sons of Israel who came out of the land of Egypt were Reuben, Israel's firstborn, the sons of Reuben, of Hanok, the family of Hanokites, of Palu, the family of Paluites, of Hezron, the family of Hezronites, of Carmi, the family of Carmites. These are the families of the Reubenites, and those who were numbered of them were 43,730. The son of Palu, Eliab. The sons of Eliab, Nemuel, and Dathan, and Abiram. These are the Dathan and Abiram who were called by the congregation, who contended against Moses and against Aaron in the company of Korah, when they contended against the Lord. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up along with Korah when that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men, so that they became a warning. The sons of Korah, however, did not die. And so here we begin the long list of census information that's broken up among the 12 tribes of Israel and the various families that make up those tribes. Each family is made up of the descendants of Jacob's grandchildren, those that were a part of the 70 that went down to Egypt in the first place in Genesis 46. Now, intentionally, the list all the way through this chapter is very similar to the one given in Numbers 1. It goes in the same order, right? Beginning with Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. And in this list, we get an extended reference to Dathan and Abiram, the Reubenites who conspired with Korah to overthrow Moses and Aaron in Numbers 16. God ended up opening up the earth and swallowing them and their families and their tents as a warning for the rest of the people to not rebel against God, and to show non-Levites how dangerous it was to barge into God's holy presence without proper reverence and consecration. And yet we also hear that Korah's sons were spared in the plague that was caused by their father, showing God's sovereignty in his judgments. This aligns with biblical passages like Deuteronomy 24 and Ezekiel 18, saying that God will not hold children accountable for their parents' sins. And so the sons of Korah actually go on to be pretty important both in the biblical story and in the construction of the Bible itself. For example, we learn in 1 Samuel 1 that Samuel the prophet was a descendant of Korah, and 11 of the Psalms credit the sons of Korah as their author. And then meanwhile, verses 12 through 50 is going to continue this list, naming out each tribe, each of their families, and giving the number of fighting men that came from that tribe. And again, the actual numbers are pretty comparable to the census data that was given in Numbers chapter 1. But there are a few details that are worth specifically highlighting. During the section on the tribe of Judah, we get a reminder about Er and Onan. Those were Judah's two sons that died in Canaan before the company moved down to Egypt. And their deaths created this whole series of unfortunate events, and that brought about Judah's son Perez, who ends up becoming an ancestor of the Messiah. Now, another detail worth highlighting is in the section on the tribe of Manasseh. We hear that in the last generation there was a man named Zelophehad who had 5 daughters but no male heirs. And that's going to really come into focus in the next chapter. But either way, all of this census data was taken so that the Israelites could take inventory of their fighting forces. After 40 years of wandering, they need to know where they're standing whenever they're going in to fight these battles to take the promised land. These are those who were numbered of the sons of Israel, 601,730. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Among these the land shall be divided for an inheritance according to the number of names. To the larger group you shall increase their inheritance, and to the smaller group you shall diminish their inheritance. Each shall be given their inheritance according to those who were numbered of them. But the land shall be divided by lot. They shall receive their inheritance according to the names of the tribes of their fathers. According to the selection by lot, their inheritance shall be divided between the larger and the smaller groups." And so when the final calculations are tallied up, the people are standing at 601,730 fighting men. That's about 2,000 families less than the previous generation. And God instructs that when they divide up the land, they do so fairly, evenly distributing the population throughout the area. This means giving larger masses of land to the larger tribes, like the tribe of Judah with its 76,000 households. And that means that smaller plots of land will go to the smaller tribes, like the tribe of Simeon and its around 22,000 households. And that division should be directly proportional to their numbers. From there, verses 57 to 62 give the numbers of the Levites and their families, while also summarizing Moses and Aaron's genealogy from Exodus 6. And also remember how the Levites couldn't fight. They had to be holy and set apart for God's services, which meant that they couldn't make themselves unclean by taking the life of another person. And so they don't count their men who are 20 years old and up, they count their men who are 1 month old and up. We also remember that the Levites are not going to receive an inheritance of a plot of land like the rest of the tribes in Israel, but in exchange they'll have the privilege of serving God, and they'll be able to receive the tithes and offerings from the people. But all of that is left unsaid in this chapter. It's expounded and talked through in Numbers 3 and 4 and 18. And all in all, there are now 23,000 men among the Levites. And that's actually a net positive of about 1,000 people compared to the census data from 4 decades prior. These are those who were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the sons of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. But among these there was not a man of those who were numbered by Moses and Aaron the priest, who numbered the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, "They will surely die in the wilderness," and not a man was left of them, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua the son of Nun. And the list ends with a reminder that even though Moses and Eleazar have counted 600,000 people, only 2 of them were there at the first census. Because of Joshua and Caleb's faithfulness in Numbers 13 and 14, they get to experience the promised land, even when the rest of their generation has died off. And so we see that God has been completely faithful to his judgment. He let the unfaithful perish, while he sustained those who trusted in his word. And so all in all, this list, this chapter, really isn't that different from Numbers 1, but it represents something completely different. It shows how God is being completely faithful to both his judgment and his covenant. The people that rebelled against him, that didn't trust in him, he allowed them to walk away and to choose their own path, one that led to death and destruction and purposelessness. And yet, he doesn't abandon the Israelites on the whole, and nor will he abandon humanity. And now, we live with the benefit knowing that he has been reconciled to his creation. He has allowed us a way to come to him through the work of Jesus. And it's only because of his constant, faithful, loyal covenant love. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope that you have a good day, and God bless.